Welcome to this webinar of the Jerusalem Press Club, JPC, another one in a series of press briefings titled Israel is Alive and Kicking, this time with Aviv Bushinsky, former spokesman of Benjamin Netanyahu, on the dramatic, unprecedented occasion of an acting prime minister who in a few hours will stand up in court to answer charges of corruption. Aviv Bushinsky, today a businessman, started as a journalist. Actually, he's a son of a distinguished journalist, Jay Bushinsky, who opened the bureau of CNN in Israel in 1980, and then covered Israel and the region for the Chicago Sun-Times for many years, and is remembered fondly by those of us who knew him. Aviv worked both in Kol Israel and Galei Tzahal before he joined Netanyahu as a spokesman in 1998. When Netanyahu served as finance minister in 2003 and 2004, Aviv was his chief of staff. Aviv, thank you for being with us. You know Netanyahu well. Many times in the past, the mavens predicted his fall only to be proven wrong. No wonder he's called a magician. Now, let's put the judicial process aside, and we all wish Netanyahu to be proven innocent. But politically, can he pull himself out of this situation?
Okay, so thank you, Uri, for for giving me the opportunity and for the warm words, especially about my father. Naturally, I admire him, and all my life I wanted to follow his footsteps. So I did it till a certain extent, but not as affluent career as my father had. Anyway, referring to your opening, Netanyahu is not only facing the charges of breaching of confidence, but also bribery, which is a severe allegation, and today it is an historical day that an acting prime minister is has to face court. Personally, I feel I have mixed feelings about it because I have a lot of admiration also to Netanyahu, especially his skills and ability. But unfortunately, he, like any other citizen, has to face court when court calls him. It's true that Netanyahu tried to avoid this day. And first of all, I must say something generally. You know, if someone from out of space would come to Israel and see what's going on here, that Prime Minister Olmert was tried, had to resign, tried, and was sent to prison. Former Israel President Moshe Katsav had to resign, to step down, face charges, and went to prison. Ezra Weizmann had to resign because of the allegation. Same with Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, Chief Rabbi, and many other cases. So people might think that Israel is a corrupt country, and it is a matter of time till they catch and find all the corrupted leaders. I must say, and I'll try to look at it in a positive way, that first of all, we have a very strong media. All those stories, and I mentioned the former prime ministers, presidents, etc., all those stories and allegations are as a result of an investigative reporter, strong journalism that exists in Israel. And second of all, that the judicial system is very strong. And therefore, the optimistic angle is that Israel is a democracy and a very strong democracy. I mentioned the democracy because Netanyahu, in a way, though he uses the democracy to fight his innocence and tries to pave his way to perhaps avoid or run away or trying to step aside from those allegations and physically go to court. But he did also use all the tools that you have in democracy. And some will say that he tried to pull every trick that there is in the book, and even some tricks that we were not aware of. First of all, when those allegations started 4 years ago, He said that there won't be anything because there wasn't anything. Then when the thing moved on, he said that though the police interrogated Netanyahu and came with the results and suggested to indict him, he said that the general attorney will demolish, will omit those charges, which he didn't. Netanyahu went to a hearing and he said that during the hearing he will be able to convince them that nothing bad was done, nothing wrong was done, and he failed. Then he tried to use all the tricks in the parliament. First of all, trying to get immunity, talking about the French law, which will give him an immunity as long as he's serving as prime minister, etc., etc. So, you know, what will this do to politics? I think that some Israelis are quite upset with the way Netanyahu is handling this ordeal. Instead of going to court and proving his innocence, just like anybody else, the legitimacy that it's not that Netanyahu, in a way also Netanyahu, but especially his people that surrounds him, trying to do, especially to the Israeli general attorney, to Avichai Mendelblit. I think that this is something that bothers people, and some say that it's right because Netanyahu's emphasis of the manhunt of Netanyahu on the right wingers, that they didn't, that people, especially the media and the left wing, and part of it is the prosecutors that are painted being left wingers. This is their way to topple Netanyahu, since they don't acknowledge the results of the elections. So I'll give you two answers to your questions. First of all, if Netanyahu would just say, you know what, okay, I'll go to court and I'll fight my innocence and I'll try to show that I'm clear, like crystal clear, like Minister of Justice Yaakov Neiman, who stepped down, was tried and found innocent. Tzachi Hanegbi, in a way the same. Avigdor Lieberman, in a way the same. So on the one hand, if we have to step down and to resign from his role as prime minister, there'll be a big question whether he'll be able and then eventually within 4 years, 5 years, they'll find out that he's innocent. There's a big doubt whether he'll be able to go back and be re-elected. So in a way, this is his only way to fight his battle, by sitting as prime minister and conducting it dual as running the country and facing those charges. The second thing, that if Netanyahu will glimp or will start saying, you know, maybe I made some mistakes, I think that I try to make the best out of it, etc., etc. So some people, not only within the opposition, but even within Netanyahu's party, will see that he's weakening and his time is about to come. And don't forget that in a year and a half anyway, they'll have to alternate with Benny Gantz. So one, they'll see that he is a lame duck, so he will lose his power to govern the country. So in a way, maybe this Netanyahu's behavior and some of his ministers who support him aggressively, maybe it's the only way to fight this thing. I don't know. I, as an Israeli citizen, I don't like it, because you need to give the minimum respect to the lawmakers in Israel. But going back to the question, this is maybe within the alternative, this is the least worst option that Netanyahu had under the circumstance. And don't forget that I read, for instance, I read an article this weekend. One of the journalists said that Netanyahu is one of the greatest leaders in the world in the 21st century. So how do you dare doing it to Netanyahu? So there are many people who think like that and say, you know, as long that he's doing good for the country, why should we pushing him or topple him or take him down, knock him down? I personally don't agree with this, with the second part of the argument, because this is law and this is how things should be done. But for Netanyahu, perhaps this is the only solution, unless he wants to resign and fight his innocence. But I'll be very doubtful that even if the judicial system, within a duration of 2 or 3 years, when this stage will be over and the judge will make their decision, I don't think that he'll be able to go back in power. So in a nutshell, he has to be there, hang on there, and try to fight his innocence. There were 4 quite, how should I say it, expressions or remarks that were made by Netanyahu political allies. First of all, the Minister of Education, who said that today the court is actually executing the will of the media. We heard the Minister of Internal Security, Police Internal Security, says that today they are opening the court against the right-wing community, roughly 2 million people who directly or indirectly voted Netanyahu. And I heard the Speaker of the Parliament, the new Speaker of the Parliament, said that this is a shameful day for Israel because the court has decided to indict Netanyahu. So these are harsh remarks that were made by people that should find a balance of their rhetoric. And I must challenge the narrative that some say that, you know, despite the fact that we all know about the allegations, the bribery, the breach of confidence, what they call the 1,000 file that Netanyahu allegedly received presents from James Packer, the billionaire Packer, and from Milchen, and case 2000, in which Netanyahu said that he'll minimize the
circulation
of Israel Hayom, if Yediot Achronot, major newspaper, will start giving him a positive press, and case 4000, this is allegedly bribery, and the case 4000 that Netanyahu allegedly deregulate things regarding communication, satellite TV, and basic landline phone in order to get positive coverage from the Walla website that is being controlled by the same owner. So some say, look, you know, there's no precedence for indicting someone for bribery only because he wanted the free press. And the fact that Netanyahu was elected knowing those allegations, that the people knew about those allegations, knows every single detail about those allegations. So this was like a fact of trust and belief that Netanyahu is innocent, and the court and the prosecution has to adhere to the fact that roughly 2 million people think that Netanyahu is eligible to stay in power. I must say that this is in a way, and this argument works. It works. People listen to this argument, but on the other hand, you must bear in mind that some, at least few, some portion of the 2 million did vote Netanyahu, knowing about these things, but they've never said that if Netanyahu will be found guilty, they'll still support him. So this is a way of twisting the reality. Netanyahu has to face trial.
What is, Netanyahu, what is his strategy? Some people mention a plea bargain, perhaps as an option, and another option, which sounds far-fetched, but still in the cards, is maybe in a year and a half, when he's anyway has to rotate with the guards, he'll be elected as president, and then 7 years he has immunity, and then by the end of it he's 80, so it's be forgotten or forgiven. What do you think of this?
Look, knowing Netanyahu has a tendency to believe in what he convinces himself to believe in. Maybe it's a very psychological analysis, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm saying it just from my personal experience. I remember once, maybe I'll take a few minutes of your time. I remember once that when Netanyahu was prime minister, and coincidentally, we went to a chess championship, and Netanyahu made the first move, and then Natan Sharansky was a senior minister in the Israeli cabinet, was there, and they made few moves. And then, in order to save time and to ensure that nobody's being humiliated, we declared a draw. And a couple of years afterwards, Netanyahu read about me playing chess someplace, and then he said, I drew master, and he was a master in chess. I drew master Sharansky. And I said to myself, come on, I was sitting behind you. I whispered a few of the moves, and we declared draw just for the photo op, that's all. But Netanyahu believed that this was reality. So, this is a famous expression: when you go to prison, all the people that sit in prison, or most of them, are innocent. At least they claim that they are innocent. So, for referring to the first part of your question, Uri, I don't think that Netanyahu will fetch for a plea bargain. First of all, because he truly believes that he's innocent. Two, we know that his one of his attorneys, late Weinroth, sniffed around and checked if this option is feasible, and he realized that both sides don't want to reach such a bargain. And the third is that even if he'll try bargaining for his some kind of a deal, I don't think that prosecution will settle for anything less than some kind of sitting in prison. So I don't think that this is feasible, and I think that for Netanyahu it is a bit too late. He perhaps could have done it before, and maybe the battle between the right and wrong, the court and the system against Netanyahu and his believers, I think that he already passed the Rubicon, if I can say. And regarding some kind of a deal by being elected as the next president of Israel, and then by definition he will get immunity. So there are two things. First of all, I'm not that sure that even if Netanyahu will fetch for such a thing, the 120 or 119 Knesset members will vote for it. And don't forget that it's a disclosed ballot. Nobody knows who you choose. So he cannot make a real deal, because at the end of the day, someone can pick another name. And I don't think that the atmosphere will be ripened enough to do something like to convert the presidency as a safe haven for someone that might be might be guilty. So I think that Netanyahu now has been driven to a certain corner that either he'll succeed and prove that he's not guilty, or unfortunately the three judges will decide differently, and then Netanyahu will be able to appeal and appeal and appeal. And you see also his tactics is to gain time as much as he can. And it looks like this thing will take a very long time, and we won't see the end of it, probably not within even 3 years, maybe 4, 5, 6 years from now. So Netanyahu will be 76, 77 by then.
Okay, Aviv, I want to take the opportunity that you're with us and you know Netanyahu. He seems to be very preoccupied with his legacy. And of course, he doesn't want to be remembered as somebody who faced the charges of corruption. So it seems that he looks at the annexation or the applying of Israeli law as the way to really leave an imprint on Israel history. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I do agree with you, because looking at Netanyahu is the long-lasting prime minister ever in Israel's history, but Ben Gurion as a prime minister was the founder of Israel. Menachem Begin made the peace with Egypt. Yitzhak Rabin, you can argue, but did the Oslo Accord, and no doubt he made peace with Jordan. Ehud Barak, we just talked about it exactly 20 years ago, was the mastermind behind the pulling out from Lebanon. Netanyahu, and I do know Netanyahu in this aspect, also as a son of a historian, this is something very important for Netanyahu, to leave something behind. As you mentioned, his legacy. And you should question what is his legacy, because there's no peace treaty with the Palestinians. So he can say, okay, I was the one who showed the real face of the Palestinian leaders, Arafat and perhaps Abu Mazen now. I'm the one who's saving Israel from the Iranian threat. Still, yet it's premature to judge and to decide whether you managed to do so. Therefore, I do think that the annexation is something that is ultimately important for Netanyahu to leave behind or to execute. And unfortunately, as things from Netanyahu's point of view, unfortunately, as things seems now, I think that he'll face huge trouble in achieving it. Because of our neighbors, especially Jordan, and maybe because of due to the situation in the US. It's true that maybe Netanyahu will use the annexation as an excuse to terminate the rotation deal or the unity government with Benny Gantz, or at least he will try to do so, and force everybody to go to a fourth elections. And he will say again, you see, this is a referendum about my innocency, and it will prove that the people do want and do believe in me and in what I represent. And then maybe he'll pull another trick, like what they call the French law. But I don't think that the Supreme Court will allow it to happen. So I think it's doomed. I think that Netanyahu will have to go through this judicial ordeal and make the best out of it.
People wonder if he's an ideologue or pragmatist, because of course he always talks about the greater Israel and the need to apply the Israeli law, etc. But he's the one who signed the Wye Plantation Agreement, which gave Hebron and other areas to the Palestinians. And this is why Yamina and others are criticizing him for not really standing up for the principles of the right. So does he have ideology or not?
It's funny that you're asking it. You're asking this question now because just this weekend there's an article about it that that they mentioned my views in one of the papers. It's hard for me to say, and I don't want to criticize Netanyahu, but I don't see him as a real ideologist. First of all, when he was elected in '96, he said that international agreements you have to respect or adhere to the agreements, and he did move on according to the Oslo Accord. First of all, the first thing that he did was evacuating Hebron. Then he himself signed the White River Accord in '98, in October '98, which was pulling out for more areas in the West Bank and Samaria. And then he saw that he's losing the confidence and the trust from the right-wingers, so he flip-flopped and said that he will do so only on the condition that the Palestinians will do their part in the deal, which they did not, and then Netanyahu terminated the agreement. But later on again, you know, it's true, okay, he opposed the disengagement plan by Sharon, but he did agree to the Palestinian state in the famous Bar Ilan speech. So is he against the Palestinian state or in favor of Palestinian state? It depends which Netanyahu, when will he find them, what date and when. The same, he wrote books about fighting terror, and he was, I think, the prime minister who released the most prisoners, Palestinian prisoners ever, 1,100 prisoners for Gilad Shalit. The same with the economy. Netanyahu is a big champion of capitalism, and he did an amazing job as a finance minister. And he had this famous phrase with a fat guy and the thin guy, that the fat guy is the government and the institution, and they are carrying the thin guys, the people who work in the market and produce, and meaning the public expenditures are enormous. And look what is being done now. We have a government with 34 ministers and numerous number of deputy ministers, and today they are approving the budget for the alternative prime minister. So it depends to whom Netanyahu you believe. But you know, I don't want to go to ideology, because ideology is something maybe it's good for historians. Today, and this is realpolitik today, if you're not flexible enough, if you don't see the timing, or smart enough, or contemplating your ideas, perhaps you don't fit to politics. And you see it with most Israeli politicians. I think that the days of Shamir are over, and people see someone that is pure or only ideologist. They say he's stubborn, and in some ways he's a loser, because he won't be able to maneuver and to govern. And I think that people respect Netanyahu not necessarily because of his ideology, maybe because his pragmatism, or the fact that in some ways he's calm enough, and you cannot be a politician if you are not a calm man. What can I do?
Last question. The people who are coming back to the trial, which will start in a few hours, you think the people who express all those opinions about the left not being able to beat Netanyahu in the ballots, try to do it through the court? You know, you mentioned Minister Gallant, Amsalem, Ohana, etc. They work on their own. They work on their own, or they are coordinated by Netanyahu.
I think that they are coordinated by Netanyahu. I don't think that Netanyahu is, exactly inserting the certain wording or terminology, what to say and what not to say. But of course, the concept is Netanyahu. If Netanyahu wants it to happen, it will happen. If he doesn't want it to happen, it won't happen. They think that they are serving Netanyahu's cause, and Netanyahu is happy that they do so. I know that Netanyahu always, but really always, believed that to achieve your goal goes through convincing the mass public. You always compared or show the example in the States. In the United States, if you want to do anything to convince the decision makers, you have to go via the mass public, and that's what he did. If you remember that Netanyahu was criticized that he's going behind or under or bypassing the White House, especially with Iran deal and other occasions, that he convinced the media, the public, knowing that the public will enforce will force the decision makers to do what he is expecting them to do. So this is Netanyahu's concept, that the people in the street will support him, and then the decision makers will either change or soften their views accordingly. If Netanyahu wouldn't want it to happen, he could have said to Amsalem, who said that the general attorney is a crook, allegedly. He could say, look, don't talk, don't say anything. It's not politically correct. It's not nice. You don't say such things. But this, I think that Netanyahu really is conducting a harsh campaign. Some will say that he's being driven or influenced by his inner family. It's not us to decide, because the end of the day, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is the one who makes the decisions. If it's the right way to the right approach or not, as an Israeli, I don't like it. It's not aesthetic, and you can only compare it to Aryeh Deri. He was the Minister of Interior Affairs, and when he was sent to prison, there was a huge rally of his supporters saying he's innocent, but apparently, on the one hand, it didn't help him. But after he paid his time in prison, he, if I can say, he resurrected, and now he's again in power, very strong in power. I don't think that it will apply to Netanyahu. If, God forbid, he'll be sent to prison, this will be the end of his career, in a very shameful way. And I really hope that for the sake of Israel, for the sake of the country, this thing won't happen. I was with Netanyahu, just to summarize it. I was with Netanyahu. I was a journalist when the story of Baron Hebron broke, claiming that appointing the next general, will be someone who will give easy time to Aryeh Deri, who I just mentioned, and in case his party will support the evacuation of Hebron. This story broke, and Netanyahu was interrogated as prime minister for the first time in '96. And at the end of the day, they didn't face any charges against Netanyahu, or actually against none of the people that allegedly were part of this scheme. The second time was in '99, towards the end of Netanyahu's first term. He was interrogated by putting all kinds of expenses, personal expenses, on the government, with the guy who did the moving, and taking presents that they received as prime minister and taking it to their own custody to the personal usage, though it belongs to the government. This was like a breach of confidence, though the police suggested that Netanyahu and his wife should be charged. The general attorney at that time, Eliakim Rubinstein, who became now the Supreme Court judge, decided not to. And unfortunately, this is the third time that Netanyahu is being caught on the line of the criminal world. Bribery is something very harsh. You know, if they'll find him guilty for bribery, he might find himself in prison. The most is 10 years, but maybe he'll be in prison more than Ehud Olmert or any other politician that unfortunately had to spend time there.
Okay, let's remind ourselves that he is innocent until proven guilty.
That's correct.
Aviv Bushinsky, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned to our next webinar, Tuesday, 12 noon, Spotlight on Iran with Dr. Raz Tzim of INSS. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being with us.